Good morning. Lovely to see you here with us this morning. Nice to see you online as well. Well, I'm not seeing you online, but welcome online. We're going to be reading from Luke chapter 8. Last week, James took us through another part of Luke 8. This section of Luke 8 is all about Jesus and his power. So last week we saw Jesus has power over disease and death, and this section is all about his power over nature and over the demons. So Luke 8, 22-39, let's read that. One day Jesus said to his disciples, "Let's go over to the other side of the lake." So they got out into the boat and set out. As they sailed, he fell asleep. A squall came down on the lake so that the boat was being swamped, and they were in great danger. The disciples went and woke him, saying, "Master, Master, we're going to drown." He got up and rebuked the wind and the raging waters. The storm subsided, and all was calm. "Where is your faith?" he asked his disciples. In fear and amazement, they asked one another, "Who is this? He commands even the winds and the water, and they obey him." They sailed to the region of the Gerasenes, which is across the lake from Galilee. When Jesus stepped ashore, he was met by a demon-possessed man from the town. For a long time, this man had not worn clothes or lived in a house, but had lived in the tombs. When he saw Jesus, he cried out and fell at his feet, shouting at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, don't torture me." For Jesus had commanded the evil spirit to come out of the man. Many times it had seized him, and though he was chained hand and foot and kept under guard, he had broken his chain and had been driven by the demon into solitary places. Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "Legion," he replied, because many demons had gone into him. And they begged him repeatedly not to order them to go into the abyss. A large herd of pigs was feeding there on the hillside. The demons begged Jesus to let them go into them, and he gave them permission. When the demons came out of the man, they went into the pigs, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and was drowned. When those tending the pigs saw what had happened, they ran off and reported this in the town and countryside. And the people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they found the man from whom the demons had gone out sitting at Jesus' feet, dressed and in his right mind. And they were afraid. Those who had seen it told the people how the demon-possessed man had been cured. Then all the people of the region of the Gerasenes asked Jesus to leave them because they were overcome with fear. So he got into the boat and left. The man from whom the demons had gone out begged to go with him, but Jesus sent him away, saying, "Return home and tell how much God has done for you." So the man went away and told all over the town how much Jesus had done for him. This is God's word. This morning, I really want to dig in with you at the first story, the story of Jesus calming the storm. And the aim sentence, I suppose, what I would really love for us all to take home is this: Jesus' powerful authority enables us to put our faith in him. We all kind of like a wee bit of control, don't we, in our situation and in our environment. A friend came round on Friday to the house, and he had a new car, and it was the coolest car I'd ever seen in my life. It was electric, but not only was it electric, he brought out the app inside my house and then put up the temperature in his car outside, just so it was ideal conditions for him to go and to drive away from. It was the most amazing display of technology I've ever seen. But we kind of laughed after it because it was a little bit silly. Two grown men getting all very giddy and excited about controlling the environment of a tin machine. It's nice, but it's not great. It's nice, but it's not great. And so, which kind of leads us to reflect often that we like to control things, but things come along which just say to us, you're actually not in control. There are things in this world which you just cannot control. In a world that changes every day, in lives that constantly change, we are reminded that we're just not in control, aren't we? Our hopes for the easygoing life kind of vanish all of a sudden, often. Sometimes relationships will become hard and difficult. It could be an illness comes along. It could be a job situation is in the balance. Lots of things just come into our lives and throw things topsy-turvy. And the question I think I want to examine with us today is this. Where do we put our faith, or where do we put our trust when life goes wrong for us or goes against what we would want for our lives? In the difficult times, who or what do we put our trust in? And in the passage that we've read in the Bible, we have an invitation, and Luke is inviting us to put our trust in Jesus. Luke is going to show us and explain to us that Jesus is the best place and the only place to put our trust, to put our faith in when life gets difficult. And he's going to show us how Jesus will calm us and will show us and take us to a place of rest and a place of peace. Jesus is going to invite us to find in him refuge and rest from the storm. And to give weight to his claim, to prove his claim, he's going to do a spectacular miracle. He's going to take the chaotic power of nature and he's going to calm it. And when he calms it, he's then going to have a word with his followers. And his word to his followers is this: you can trust me. You can put your faith in me, even in the storm. So this morning, as we look at these few verses, we're going to see, first of all, that Jesus is Lord over all. And then second, we're going to look and see that in the storm, look at Jesus. First of all, Jesus is Lord of all. It may just be the people I hang out with, but I come across quite a lot of cynical people, skeptics. A few weeks ago, I went to Skye, and unbelievably, in Skye was like, of the 14 days I was in Skye, 13 were sunshine and glorious and fabulous. So I came down, I said, oh, it was amazing, it was the best holiday, I haven't seen so much sun in Skye in my life. And the people said, aye, right, nah, can't be true. You show them the photos, it's beautiful, you got the lochs, the mountains, the blue skies, and then they just say, it's Photoshop, pal. People are skeptical. They want this rock-solid proof that what you say is true. And Luke here is recounting an incredible event which really backs up the claims that Jesus has been making about himself. Jesus is saying to the disciples and to the crowds around him, I'm more than a great teacher. I am more than a wonder worker. I am more than a simple curiosity. I am God in the flesh. Picture the scene. It's been a long day of teaching for Jesus. He's been in front of large crowds. He's been explaining what his new kingdom is all like. He is tired and weary. And he says to his friends, let's get some rest. Let's get out of here. Let's move on. So he says, it's a beautiful night. It's coming into evening. Lake is calm. Let's go take the boat off into the Sea of Galilee. And let's go and find our rest there. So himself and his disciples wearily walk to the shoreline. They push out in the boat. Jesus kind of curls up in a ball and falls fast asleep. The disciples, they're all kind of just very relaxed. They know that a lot of their guys, they know the seas, they're fisher folk. They're just shooting the breeze. They're just chatting away, enjoying just time together. Gently, they're gliding over the sea, but suddenly, all manner of chaos breaks loose. The wind, the storm, the sails are being battered, they're being tossed up and down, and they are terrified. These hardy fishermen are swarming around, not sure what to do. They're quite literally at sea, and they are in pandemonium mood. And they just fear that it's all going to go terribly wrong in the sea, that they are going to be at the bottom of the sea in minutes. They're struggling to see any hope in this situation. Out of ideas and running around the boat, they go to Jesus and shake him awake. Master, Master, we are perishing. And Jesus kind of comes out of his deep, deep sleep, kind of rubs his eyes, and he stands up, and then the first thing he does, he rebukes the wind and the waves, and what's more, they cease. Verse 24. Now, there's an awful lot going on here. The first thing, when you're in a storm, who would ever think of rebuking the storm? Most of us just aim for shelter. But Jesus does something remarkable. He rebukes the storm. And we'll kind of come back and explore that a wee bit in a minute. But also, when he rebukes the storm responds, and it goes flat calm. And if you know anything about the seas and storms, they just don't go flat calm like that. They take time just to even out. It's an incredible moment because Jesus speaks and creation listens, as it were. Creation comes under his control. Jesus rebukes, and even the storm becomes a still. I think as the disciples reflect on this, probably not on the boat, but maybe later on when they go back onto the shore, they would be, I think, recalling what they've been learning about in their youth. As Jewish boys growing up, they would have learnt the Jewish Bible, what we call the Old Testament. And they would have read about how God alone has the power over nature. In the psalm that we've been reading from and singing, Psalm 107, verse 29, it states this about God. He made the storm be still, and the waves of the sea were hushed. What Jesus has done here is this. He has orchestrated this event in such a way to declare and to demonstrate again to disciples who were often doubting who he was, I am God. I am who I claim to be. You disciples, you guys, you know from your history, that only God controls creation. That you know only God controls the wind and the waves. You know that God speaks and it came into being in Genesis 1. Look what I've just done. I've just spoken and creation has come under my control. I've done that because I'm God. What God does, Jesus does because Jesus is God. You see, the event is all planned out by Jesus. It's part of the plan for the lives of his disciples. This was not a surprise to Jesus. It's like, oh, storm, better stop that. This was all carefully planned out and orchestrated. And Jesus comes and brings rest into that situation. And I think at times we're often tempted to kind of say when troubles come up, when hard things come into our life, we're often tempted to say to someone, well, God's allowed it for some reason. As if someone else has wrestled control from God for a little while, or cut a deal with God, and God says, okay, we'll let that go for this situation. But the truth is that God is sovereign, God is in control, and God is love. And we must hold these two things together, these two truths together, because when we do that, it brings to us a great comfort. Now, the reason why we have to say that God allows all things is because it says in his word. in the book of Isaiah, in chapter 45, verse 6 and 7, we have these words, I am the Lord, and there is no other, the one forming light and creating darkness, causing well-being and creating calamity. I am the Lord who does all these things. It's a really hard truth to appreciate and to cherish, to say that God is both loving and sovereign. But it's a truth which I want us to take great comfort from. How can we take comfort from it? Well, I think we can take comfort from this truth because Jesus is Lord over all things, even Lord of the storms in our lives. When the storms come, Jesus is in control. God isn't surprised by the storms in our life, but God is at work through the storms. In this storm, God was at work, and we're going to see this by helping the disciples grow in their faith. And that is often the case for us. In the midst of the storms, God is helping us grow in faith. In the careful retelling of this event, Luke is making us aware that this scenario is the worst case scenario. There's nothing more awful that could happen to a boat in the Sea of Galilee than to be caught up in a storm and to be in a place where you think you're going to drown. But Luke says to us, Jesus is able. Jesus is fully adequate for this out of control, worst case scenario. And it's because of this that we can put our faith in Jesus in our own storms. And so, first of all, we see that Jesus is Lord over all. And then, second thing we notice is that Jesus invites his disciples to look to him during the storm. And he invites us also to look to Jesus in the storm. I don't know about you, but on days where I'm busy, I often forget the stuff that's really important to me. I remember often it would happen on a Monday morning when I was teaching in high school. You've decided to create the lesson which requires like 100 cards to be cut out for some kind of random activity. And you're sitting there at your desk at 8:25, your tongue's hanging out, and you're just cutting out all these squares. You're getting stressed, you're getting frustrated because you've got 77 more cards to do, and they've got about 3 minutes. But then all of a sudden, you'd forgotten the guillotine in the print room. So you go dash down to the print room, doom, 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 doom. It's all done within minutes. And it's infuriating at the time because you're working so hard, you put so much pressure, and it's just going so wrong. But then you forget, why didn't I do that earlier? And it's a kind of silly scenario, but it kind of gets across this situation the disciples found themselves in a wee bit. The disciples in their storm had forgotten to use something. They had forgotten to use their faith. They had forgotten that Jesus was in the boat with them and that their faith in Jesus would help them through that storm. After Jesus had calmed the storm, in verse 25, he asked them a question. And you see it on the board there. And the question is this: where is your faith? Where is your faith? Not, why don't you have faith? But where is it? Where's it gone? You've worn yourselves out trying to solve this situation. But really, disciples, you should have just looked to me. You should have come to me, and I would have helped. You had God in the boat, and you'd forgotten that. Because the disciples, when they see the storm coming, they go into mode, right, let's sort this out ourselves. And so they get the buckets out, they bail the water out the side, they try to fix the mast, they try to keep the sail from ripping. And they're going around doing all that kind of stuff. And Jesus is asking them, where did your faith in me go? Why didn't you trust me? Come on, guys. Surely you might have considered that since I was in the boat, I might be able to do something to help here. But the thing is, the disciples are just like us. In our storms, we often desperately try to sort it out ourselves. We try to get ourselves through the storm somehow. We have our own versions of the disciples and their buckets. My own favorite bucket is to quietly go in on myself and just hope that it all goes to plan in the end. Others might be like the disciples, work really hard, trying to get yourselves out of it. Some of you will be like to get angry, to get frustrated, take it out on others, just get mad at the world. And there are many different ways in which we try to cope with the storms in our life. But each of the approaches leave us feeling confused, tired, and disoriented. Because we have no control over it. We have no mastery over the situation. We just need to go to the one who does. We need to go to Jesus. And this is the beautiful thing about this passage. Jesus invites us to let go and to trust him. He comes and invites us to reflect on who he is during the storm. And this is one of the most beautiful things in the passage. Jesus helps the disciples, even though the disciples have very weak faith. The disciples wake Jesus up, I think probably just as an extra pair of hands to help them get through this, not because they had a really clear view on that he was God. And so in the weakness of our faith, when our faith is really weak, Jesus invites us and Jesus responds to us and comes to us to help us. And so, as followers of Jesus, in the storms, we have this incredible opportunity to use our faith in Jesus to help us, to lay aside our thinking that we can sort it out, and just to come to him and hand over our situation to him. I think sometimes we hope and live lives which just assume our faith will come on in times of trouble. But it's not what happened to the disciples, was it? The disciples didn't get rock-solid faith when the storm came. They were weak. They had weak faith. I think we kind of imagine our faith is like your kind of solar-powered garden lights. They come on when the darkness comes, automatically. But that's not really how faith works. I think we need to use it. We need to bring it out, and we need to activate it. And we do that through reflecting on Jesus. And so, when the storms come, how do we activate our faith? Well, I think one of the best ways we do that is just to remember who Jesus is. Remember the truths you know about Jesus. We remember that, Jesus is God made human. We remember the truth that Jesus came to save us. We remember the truth that that Jesus died on the cross for us. We remember that Jesus rose from the dead. We remember that Jesus describes himself as a good shepherd. We remember the truth that he always is with us. We remember the truth that he is forever with us and he's taking us home, and that we can have a real relationship with him. In the storm, we need to kind of actively try to focus on who Jesus is. And I know in a recent past, that's kind of all that I've been able to do at some points, waiting in a doctor's surgery. You're worried and you're confused, you're in a storm, and you're not very clear-minded, but you just think, okay, Jesus, you're with me. Jesus, you've got me, and you've got us. You just remember the simple truths about Jesus. And the beautiful thing that happens is this. When you put your faith with your fear begins to reduce, and your faith begins to grow. And the beautiful thing about that is you can rest more easily, even in the storm, because you know you're not in control, but you know that Jesus is in control, and he is Lord over all. Sometimes we can act in a different way. We can kind of put our faith to action like that. But then sometimes we can do what the disciples did, which we read about in Mark's account of this same story. We can actually in the time of storm, we can say to God, don't you care? Don't you care what I'm going through? Don't you care what my friend is going through? And in Mark 4, verse 38, the disciples say to Jesus the very same words, Teacher, don't you care if we drown? Don't you love us? And when Jesus asked that question, Jesus gets up and he rebukes the storm, and it goes calm. And he shows them his care for them in that moment. And it's an incredible demonstration of care. But Jesus is going to show you and to tell you that he cares for you by going through an even a more incredible event. On the cross, Jesus says to us, I love you. Jesus walked through the storm of God's wrath, suffered the judgment of God for us, and dies on the cross. He goes through that storm of God's fury so that we can find rest in him. Jesus is resting in the storm because it's a picture that we too in Jesus can rest in our storm. So in conclusion this morning, Jesus has stopped at nothing to help the disciples and to help us learn and see our need to have our faith in him. That even in the intensity of our storms, we can put our faith in Jesus, because in Jesus we find true rest, where we find one who is Lord over all and who can give us the rest that we so desperately need in those moments of storm.